Welcome back to my basic character guide where I go over the general use of a character, pros and cons, and skills you may prioritize over others. Before doing that, I want to talk about two pieces of equipment that are tied to him. One being the Starlight Sword. Statistically, is really just a good weapon for anybody. The slash attack plus 20, so any physical attacking unit, definitely a good go-to. The limited abilities all go to Lucio. Not a bad stat on here. Everything would be absolutely useful for him, but don't feel like rushed to build it up. Just take your time, but definitely something that's worth it. The second being is TMR. There's a lot of things that you can do with this if you want to make it more tanky, make it more attack oriented as far as your trust stones go, but the limited ability to bestow AP at a medium rate is really useful. Although this is not better than Bells, it's definitely why I mentioned it in my top 4 TMRs for beginners. So looking at his main job, Luminescent Arc is definitely more a PvP skill. Lowering reaction ability can hinder reflex and things like that. It could have its general use in PvE. This is definitely something I use more so in PvP. Same thing with Scintillating Eclipse. Destroying physical barriers can be situational with PvE, but generally always useful for PvP, good at setting up. Greater Domain of Light is something that you would want to use if you want to keep him back, or maybe you're using him in the middle and you're having your other units come to him and buff him for PvP. But I feel like it really depends on the map. If the map is shorter, this can be something that can get him killed because he's not properly prepped for defense, or he's possibly just too close to your other units and they get AoE to death. But with that said, it can still be very useful. It just really depends on the team that you're going up against. Tri-Slasher is definitely his best attack. Dealing 3 hits at a medium rate is really good for setting up a chain. And it's a skill that's tied to multiple support abilities that can alter it from being a slashing attack to a pierce attack to a strike attack. So even if he's not maintaining a light chain with whoever he's running with, you'd probably just base this off of whoever your main DPS is. He can set them up that way, or continue a chain and just outright kill whoever. Crescent Break is a really good skill. You just have to be really cautious of the range that it has because they will prioritize this over Taunting Blade. I just feel like this skill is better used manually, or I'd rather have somebody else lowering defense. Light Blessing is definitely his best self buff, and raising unit attack resist can be very crucial for keeping him alive. The agility up for 3 turns on a critical hit is also really good. Just keep in mind that he will prioritize Bells or his own TMR over this. And Radiant Nova is an AoE attack that lowers bravery. Lowering bravery may be good for attack dampening or something like that, but it's just, I would just personally want him using other skills aside from this. I really don't feel like there's anything in the Warrior of the Dawning Light sub-job that you would use, so we're just going to skip the Paladin and Monk. As far as Paladin goes, he pretty much got everything but Courage. Sentinel you leave on. It's going to be wonky. He'll use it when he feels like he's in danger, but it's better to have than not. Taunting Blade you would only turn off if you're not trying to use him as a tank. Saintly Wall is one of those skills that are just better off used manually. If it's turned on, he'll prioritize it over Bells or his own TMR. Blade Bash can be a really decent skill as far as running with Taunting Blade because it won't conflict with the range. He'll be able to use Taunting Blade first and then go into this. If you can land that stun, it'll be very crucial in a fight. As far as Monk goes, Terra Slash is generally useful against anybody but Gilgamesh because I think he's the only one who natively has float. Anybody else would have to have it casted on them, and I can't say I've seen that at all. The piercing damage can be very useful, and the range isn't bad. Pummel can be really good for building a chain, and Store is something that's better off manually used. There's other skills he would want to prioritize over this. As far as the sets go, once again you would use Tri-Calibration if you want to change Tri-Slasher to something else. Aside from that, it really depends on how you want to use them. You can build up Strike Mastery if you want to, but I just feel like when it comes to Monk versus Paladin, you're probably going to want Paladin just because it has a lot more in it. And with Tri-Calibration, you're kind of getting the best of 3 different worlds. Personally for me, I go with Illumed Swordmanship. It raises his attack, his crit rate, his defense pin, and bestows a Dark Eater. So even if only 3 of 4 of these can be useful at all times, Dark Eater comes in handy when you need it. And finally, Holy Knight's Protection just to raise his HP and defense. Once again, I use him as a bruiser, so I want him to be as tanky as possible. As for his counter abilities, you could go with Fist Counter, just for the ability to counterattack. But personally for me, I go with Aura of Light. The chance of taking reduced physical attack damage is really useful. Once again, for what he is, he wants to be somebody who's taking physical attacks and tanking for your team long enough for them to deal damage and kill whoever's on the board. Something I feel that reinforces the universal usability of Lucio in general is his master ability. It's also a high possibility that he will get a master ability buff in the future, maybe raising his defense or something along those lines. So that's definitely something to keep a lookout for. And although I feel like this is not his strongest ability, it's definitely probably his most important for his element. He has a Light Imperil that is always going to be absolutely useful for any kind of guild raid. Once again, a very powerful skill for his element. Although Lucio, like certain other characters, can be built up to be very tanky, in my opinion, until they get a buff that can natively give them hate to draw the enemy in, not have to rely on Taunting Blade, he doesn't have something like Proclamation, he's definitely a really good bruiser. And when looking at him, you almost want to run him with a tank in a DPS, just because if you're able to keep him alive and he's able to chain off of whoever your DPS is, they're going to be tearing through a lot of people. He's going to be good for any rainbow team, because I feel like Light itself wants to be evadey. I just don't feel like he warrants for a healer. Something else to keep in mind, he does not have courage or any means of removing courage or re-raise. You're probably going to need something like Ryryu's TMR, and with him being so easily killable, it's basically going to make your healer useless, take damage, and probably just start healing themselves until they die. If you're not going to use him as a bruiser, you probably want to use him with a fast Esper, but anything else aside from that, you're definitely going to be using a tanky Esper at the cost of his agility, and try to supplement that loss of agility with equipment. But I do think he's an awesome character. Making him free to play and that accessibility to just any new player is just really awesome. The TMR is really good, the sword's really good. But I wouldn't say prioritize him over characters you can pull for. There are definitely better characters in the general pool or the seasonal pool. He's just somebody you slow build over time. And with that, I have nothing else to really say about him. It's possible we can get a summonable version of him in the future. Maybe it's him older or something like that, I don't know. But it'd be really cool to see a counterpart, maybe a dark version of Lucio or something like that. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Have a nice day.